Damien, welcome to AIM10X Digital. It's really great having you here. I'm definitely looking forward to today's conversation. But let's start off with an introduction. Who's Damien? And also tell us a little bit more about Vestas.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Damien Lhors. I'm leading global transport and global supply chain for Vestas. I'm French. I joined the company a bit more than 10 months ago now. And very excited about what we're doing in Vestas and managing some of the very complex supply chain. Yes.
Excellent. Vestas, I mean, many people associate you with, renewable energy and, big windmills, but tell us a little bit more about the company.
Yeah, so we are actually a pretty old company, 125 years old company.
Oh, wow.
in Denmark. Obviously not always on windmills, but that's what we do now. And we are definitely in a renewable space, helping our client, producing green electricity.
That's amazing. Now, obviously, Vestas, in the business that you're in, that comes with a complex supply chain. At the same time, you're sort of on an accelerated growth journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about the key characteristics of the Vestas supply chain? And then also, how are you balancing that complexity with the growth of the company?
Yeah. So the first thing that we have to really understand when we talk about supply chain in Vestas is that actually our products are alive for 25, 30 years minimum. So of course, there is the inception, the installation, and then they have to be serviced for all these years. So the supply chain is actually, in terms of time, pretty extended. The other part is we have, container and boxes coming into our factory, but then what's coming out of the factory is a gigapart that weight many tons, and when you look at some of the blades, they are around 100 meters long. So there is a very complex physical supply chain that has to go through a lot of hurdles and a lot of difficult processes to manage to get to where they are going to be installed finally. So that's what we are trying to do in Vestas, planning and managing all of those activity for those turbines to start spinning and creating green energy.
Absolutely. Now, actually, when you joined Vestas, you're 10 months into the company. So what were some of the things that you maybe didn't expect when it comes to the complexity of the supply chain, but that you're now obviously, very much aware of and working on?
Yeah. I was always, intrigued about those big out-of-gauge components that had to move, and how you actually plan for those. How do you actually operationally move those components? And I'm very humbled by the level of complexity that the team is managing, and that's the most impressive part. When you see those gigantic, nacelle moving out of the factory and getting loaded on a port, on a vessel to go and to their final destination, that's extremely humbling. Dealing with the nacelle itself, all the safety around those kind of operation, but also the specific transport equipment, getting the vessel ready, getting all of the activity that needs to cater for that operation together is a pretty amazing task.
No, totally. And actually, I've seen some videos on how they transport the blades, from the manufacturing side to the port, and then from the port ultimately to the offshore location. I mean, I can definitely recommend everyone in the audience to just Google it and watch it. What I also find interesting is that a lot of times, supply chain professionals, they almost think of logistics, as a given. You put it in a truck or you put it in a plane, you're good to go. But for you, it's like a big part of supply chain planning and decision-making to make sure that you can actually transport the blade and ultimately that it arrives, at the right site for the installation. So that's, super exciting, and I definitely can see that complexity when you walk into Vestas. Now, Vestas at the same time is also on a supply chain transformation journey. And what I would love to know from you, Damien, is how do you think about the operating model? Because some people, they might say, oh yeah, there's technology, and yes, there's technology, and we'll be talking about that, but obviously there is also a big process and people component. So can you talk a little bit more about how do you see that, and are you maybe reshaping that operating model, and some thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. What we're trying to do is to really simplify the way we actually manage the supply chain, in the sense of the way we plan, the way we interact together. The more handover you have between the different departments, the more risk you have of misunderstanding, but also, need for meetings and alignment and roles and responsibility conversation. So trying to really have an organization that first focus on long-term planning, very much working with sales, what we traditionally call sales and operation planning, but then having one team in charge of, the shorter term planning and then the execution, including transportation. That's the way we have organized now supply chain in Vestas.
Interesting. Why did you decide for that sequence?
So I think, we are in a very complex industry that is going through a maturity journey. Growth has been in the conversation for a while, and growth doesn't happen when you think about the size of what we are trying to move. Doesn't happen because you get the order from the customer. It happened because you had planned for it, and you are ready as an organization. So really getting that initial strategic planning connected with sales and making sure that we understand when it's time for growth and what does it mean being ready is the ultimate priority. And then after that, you look into, okay, now we are coming to an 18-24 months window. We need to start planning for the execution. And it means obviously the suppliers, it means the plant, but it also means, the construction activity, the transport activity.
Yeah, no, that's actually very interesting. And obviously the concept of lead times, especially in your industry, might be, different than in many other industries. When you talk about long-term planning, sort of what is that horizon? And ultimately then what are all the planning horizons that you want to connect to one and each other?
Yeah. So when you would think long-term planning, onshore would probably be, 3 to 4 years. Offshore is 5 to 6.
And then it's all getting ready for the big tenders so that when there is a tender, you can actually participate and deliver.
Exactly. But you can also understand if actually you have the capacity to fulfill those supply for the customer.
Excellent. Now, when you came in, Vestas and O9 were on a journey together. So there have been, things have been done when it comes to the transformation. You obviously come in, you look at that, from the outside, you have a strong point of view on the operating model. So where are we on the journey? What have we learned so far? And what are some of the next steps that we are taking?
Yeah. So I think, definitely the complexity of our supply chain is a challenge. And when you try to drive a transformation, you need to cut things into pieces so they can be digestible. And that's a little bit the challenge we have right now. We probably have looked at things a bit too broadly initially and probably a little bit too ambitious. But again, there is no doubt that O9 is the platform we need and that we are going to continue that journey. What I really like is also the fact that because we have this very good relationship, we can actually adjust and we can cater the setup we are putting in place with O9 to the new organization model. And that was very important for me. Restarting from scratch is never funny. And so the fact that we don't have to do that and we'll be able to entertain what we want to do while continuing that transformation, that Compass project, is very important for me.
Absolutely. In general, what do you expect in a partnership with your technology provider like O9? Because there are companies, that would say, there's an IT application and I need to work with that. There are companies like yourself and people like yourself that see that way more strategic. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because in the audience, many people trying to understand, that shift in, having an IT vendor versus having a strategic partner, and, what's your vision and how do you want to do that with O9?
Yeah. So that dialogue, that trust is very important, right? I mean, I can have dreams of how I want things to run. Then at some point, I need someone to come and calibrate and say, at least, to get there, this is what it takes, and this is how you go there. And I think having that dialogue is very important, and that's the proof of the partnership. That's one thing. The second thing is also, O9 is really at the forefront of what we are trying to do in terms of advanced planning here. So it's also helping us, make the organization understand that the way we have been doing things in the past is not going to help us deliver what we want to do in the future. So it helps drive the need for change and also new competency and people that are frankly excited to be working with this kind of planning solution.
No, that's exciting. And actually, I would love to ask a follow-up question on that, because driving the change, I think I'm hearing that, at the event, but in general on the market, right? That's one of the challenges that organizations are facing. There's one thing to say, yes, we have to do this. There's business value if we do it. Okay, then you do it, but then how do you ultimately drive the change? What have you seen in your career, but also what's your perspective on how to do that effectively?
Yeah. So I think, you would always hear that you need, the stakeholder support and engagement. And yes, absolutely. Of course, that's a prerequisite. But to me, to successfully transform in a sustainable way, meaning something that's going to stick, it's bottom up. You need to work with the users. You need to work with the people that will actually have to change and do things differently and use different tools and work in a different organization and interact with different people. And it's very important that you connect the project, the transformation program, to actually the user and the people that will be catering for that change. Not only the stakeholders. Of course, the stakeholder needs to understand. Of course, the stakeholder needs to see value. But the users have to be onboarded with a big sense of priority, because it will also help define, how we're actually going to transform and what do they need.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. And thanks for sharing that. Now also, I know that ultimately your vision is, okay, you talked about planning across time horizons. So it's long-range planning, we get into S&OP, ultimately we get to the execution. So, okay, that has to all connect to one in each other. But then there is also sort of the horizontal integration, where I want to connect, demand with my, operations, with my, upstream supply chain partners, some contract manufacturers, suppliers, the suppliers of your suppliers. And then there is, very important, you mentioned that, your products, are out there, offshore, on their, ocean sort of environment, so you have to maintain that as well. What is ultimately your expectation from technology when you think about that horizontal integration, as well as catering for one side is new build and the other side is your services supply chain?
Yeah. So for me, I want ultimately this kind of platform to be a collaboration tool across that value chain. I want my suppliers able to connect, get their forecast, understand, also contribute. I want my customer potentially, when you think service, something is down, if they can start to, maybe put their needs or help us on the planning of some major, service activity through the platform, that would be, extremely efficient and really helping us being responsive to those different demands. But for me, the collaboration is really the ultimate part. Of course, the visibility, of course, the scenario planning, but really, making all of the hands shakes into the platform is the opportunity.
Interesting. Now, follow-up question on that. What would be the biggest hurdle to overcome? Let's call this sort of technology-enabled, end-to-end collaboration.
Yeah. I think data is the challenge, because, if you don't have good data feed, it's ultimately the system is going to do something wrong. And so really driving the importance of data. And data used to be, probably in the past, and when you think, the good old Excel spreadsheet, extremely nimble and could be changed, and yes, we would adjust left and right. This is not true anymore when you work with this kind of platform. So making sure that everybody understands that the data is key to the success of this kind of solution.
No, absolutely. And I think what we're also seeing with our clients is not necessarily reliant on just the master data, transactional data in the ERP. There's so many data when it comes to the capacities of your suppliers, your in and outbound capacity of your manufacturing sites, the capacity that you have when it comes to transporting the blades to sea. A lot of the data still resides in Excel spreadsheets, and ultimately that has to come together in a platform so that the key planning data and planning parameters can be maintained. I have one final question for you. You're French, but you're working in Denmark. How is that?
So, I spent almost 10 years in the US, in Houston, Texas. I really enjoyed living there. I have a lot of friends. But coming back to Europe was a pleasant surprise. And I think Copenhagen is, live up to its reputation. It's a very nice city. And we really enjoy it. And it's good to be back in Europe.
Amazing. Look, Damien, thanks for joining here at Aim 10X Digital. Great conversation, and I assume people can connect with you on LinkedIn and continue to
Absolutely.
share learnings. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Take care.